good afternoon, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be here, and it's such a pleasure to be in Delta. And I was speaking to my father last night. My father is 94. As a matter of fact, on September the 26th, he turns 95. And he was saying last night in Edmonton, it was going down to 1 degree. So I have to say, I'm really thrilled to be in BC. It's wonderful to be able to actually be here and be able to speak a little bit with the JIBC as the sponsors. The JIBC is a wonderful institution that when I first came to BC, I had no idea of the overall ability as police officers to be able to have a training facility such as this, and to be able to be educated, to be able to experience and work with our colleagues in that particular area of public safety is amazing. So Michelle, you do great work. Thank you. So we're going to start off today. I always start my presentations with a bluff comment. Anyone know what bluff means? I see, that's cheating. You can't say that, Carla. Bottom line up front. So I want to tell you what the bottom line is up front. We're going to talk for about 20 minutes here today. I'm going to have just 8 slides, so not a whole bunch of slides, but we're going to talk, around those slides. And at the end of the day, really, we're going to begin where we start. And it's going to be about how we work together as a community, as a business community, with the Delta Police Department, the Delta Fire Department, the Corporation of Delta, around public safety in Delta. So let's start here. Fact. The fact is that last year in BC, or in the Lower Mainland, I'm sorry, there were 30 bank robberies. 30 bank robberies overall. And out of those 30 bank robberies, approximately $60,000 was stolen out of those institutional bank robberies. Right next to that is someone stealing from inside a car. Last year in the Lower Mainland, there were 38,000 reported theft from autos. So when you start talking about every bank robbery, I can guarantee you every single bank robbery that happened in the Lower Mainland last year was reported to the police, and we responded to that. When we start talking about theft from autos, the 38,000, we know that there were about somewhere in the area of 50% reported to the police. And out of those 50%, approximately $11.4 million was stolen. When we start looking at that from a policing impact, it's important for us to be able to assess and be able to determine what our standard operating procedures are, our SOPs. So when I talk about SOPs around a bank robbery, I can guarantee you that I will go to the Delta Police Department policy book, and I'll look in the Delta Police Department, and there will be pages and pages and pages of how the police will respond to a bank robbery. It will list every detail, and it'll also list how we respond and investigate after the fact. So once that bank robbery is over, the $60,000 is gone, we know that, we will begin that investigation. I bet you often in the police resources spent well over $60,000 investigating those particular crimes and looking for those bank robbers. I want to talk a little bit about the theft from autos though. On the theft from autos, I looked before I left here, before I left to come to the town and country, we don't have any policy and procedure on it. We respond to, let our officers respond, and they take the necessary information. Now, when we think about that a little bit further, when we think about an officer responding to a theft from auto, there are some communities that actually the officers don't even respond. So if you were to have something stolen from your car in Vancouver, they'd take your report right over the phone. You wouldn't even see an officer. And yet somewhere in the community of Delta, we'll be able to respond to that particular issue. Now, why am I talking about bank robberies and theft from autos, and why am I trying to compare the two? Because it really comes down to when we start talking about police leadership, we start talking a little bit about impact on the community and how we work with the community to be able to assess different impacts. I can guarantee you that every single bank robbery is responded to, every single one is reported, every single one is insured, and every single one is investigated thoroughly. The theft from autos, which we may all have a student that may have a laptop, may have their wallet, may have their cell phone in the car with all of their information from the University of BC or whatever university they're going to, maybe JIBC, Michelle, and is all gone like that. Huge impact to that particular person. Bank robberies still have impact, but it's all insured and they get their money all back. So as a police chief, when we start to evaluate the impact on the community, we depend on our ability to be able to have a dialogue with the community to understand what the needs of that community are and the impact. So let me take it one step further. Tsawwassen, nice quiet bedroom community of Vancouver, wonderful community. We understand that in Tsawwassen, there's typically somewhere in the area between 5 to 10 theft from autos every month. somewhere in that area. And that's on and off over the last year, which sounds like a lot. In July, there was 48. Look at that. You're right. Absolutely. That's what we said too. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about how we work with the community to be able to identify not the incidents, because every incident of a bank robbery is investigated, but talk about the problems that are faced in communities that as a police department, as a community police department, it's very important for us to be able to work on. So it's very important for us to understand what's happening on that theft from auto, because that has huge impact in a community. It had huge impact in Tsawwassen when they had 48 in the month of July. So that's where we're going to go today. There we go. So I'm going to start off by talking a little bit about this little city we have called Delta. And this plays in right perfectly with where we're going from the JIBC. So when I came to Delta, I knew a little bit about the city, but I certainly didn't understand the significant big city risks that often this city faces. And I started to produce a list, and it was a top 10 list of all the risks that we face as a police department. So we know that the Delta Police Department has a 94% satisfaction rate with the community. That's huge. I've never experienced that in my career, and it's wonderful. And it's due to the hard work of the men and women on the street and the work of the community and the ownership and enthusiasm and passion this community has for its neighbors. So it's quite amazing. But then I began to dig in a little bit deeper. Delta, surrounded by water. It's got an ocean community. As a result, what is it likely to maybe face at one point in time during its history? Floods. Absolutely. Let's talk about BC Ferries. Have we ever heard about accidents happening at BC Ferries at the Tsawwassen terminal? Absolutely. How about a major port? Major port, and we got more coming. Delta Port 1, Delta Port 2, if Delta Port 2 was approved, big time numbers. We have a border. We have a municipal airport. And someone can help me out with the numbers on the municipal airport. Second in Canada for touch and goes? Is that right? Yeah. Second. It's busy. It's a busy, busy airport. Highways. We have 4 major highways. 4 major highways that connect in this particular community. Tunnels. Well, everyone knows the tunnel. I don't think we have to go there. Bridges, railway. I see lots of coal trains coming through. Always they provide that opportunity for some sort of hazmat material or coming out of the ports. All the trains carrying materials coming out of the ports. Industrial area, including a large LNG plant. 2 industrial areas. Jurisdictional police issues, including borders with Surrey, which is facing some ongoing issues around their policing and public safety. And we have the TFN development, which we know is growing significantly. Future development, when we talk about TFN as well, a residential community coming in there, a big mall also coming in. And finally, we're in a red zone. If we were to have an earthquake, Delta is going to face some casualty. They are. We're in a red zone. So when I talk about what keeps me up at night, these are it. Because that 94% satisfaction rating that we have with the public can go in the toilet in about 35 seconds. If we're not prepared to be able to respond to any one of these and be able to manage the public safety issues like that, unfortunately, we lose confidence. So I want to talk a little bit about the Delta Police Plan. So what we're doing is we're actually changing the wheels of the car, changing the tires on the car while it's moving, because all of this, as we heard in the previous presentation from JIBC, we have to be planning, we have to be exercising, we have to be training, and then we have to do the whole circle again. So on all of these potential risks as a police department, in order to provide public safety, to provide wonderful quality of life that we have in this community, we have to be working with all of these. So how are we going to do it? I want to be able to talk about 3 things here specifically today about the plan for the Delta Police Department to be able to manage some of these risks and keep our community safe. The first piece I want to be able to talk about is I think we need to be intelligence-led and evidence-based. I think it's pretty simple. We want to be able to be predictive. We want to understand crime trends. We want to be able to work on that. But we want to be evidence-based. When we make decisions, we want to make sure those decisions are right. So I'm going to talk more about that as we move on. The second piece, we want to continue to be community-based. We're very proud of the no call, too small philosophy and being community-based. And we'll talk a little bit about that as well. But the last piece, which you probably haven't heard lots of people talk about before, is we need to keep the transportation systems moving. And I'm talking to a business community here today, and that transportation hub that we have coming through Delta, whether it be by water, by port, by truck, by highway, by freeway, by tunnel, by new bridge, whatever it is, we better keep it safe. And that's part of our role as Delta Police Department, to ensure that that keeps moving, keep the transportation moving, keep things coming to your business, keep people coming to the fish and chip restaurant. That's what we want to be able to do as a police department.
I used to think my job was all about arrests, chasing bad guys. Now I see my work differently. We analyze crime data, spot patterns, and figure out where to send patrols. It's helped some U.S. cities cut serious crime by up to 30%. By stopping it before it happens. Let's build a smarter planet.
We're very, very lucky in BC that we have a provincial-wide database called PRIME. That is a provincial-wide police database that allows us to be able to share information with all of our partners, such as Assistant Commissioner Peter German. That's right. So, and he said he's going to keep me honest on this one, so I can't extend the truth at all. So, Peter, I look to you for my truth validator. Yes, exactly. So we have Prime. Prime is a wonderful tool for us, and it gives us an amazing ability for us to be able to look at information differently. So the Delta Police Department will build a piece of business intelligence that sits on top of Prime that gives us the ability to analyze information. It gives us the ability to be able to see trends, crime spikes, more importantly. That's what I would call what happened in Tsawwassen in July. It was a spike. It came right down to normal, but it was only responsible, there were 3 people responsible for that spike. That was it. It wasn't something like we were having lots of people. And those people are coming to us now through the transportation network. They didn't know how to spell Tsawwassen before. And now all of a sudden they're traveling on the SFPR and they're ending up in Tsawwassen because it's a wonderful bedroom community. And you know what? For the longest time, how many people live in Tsawwassen here? Did you ever lock your doors? That's right. And it's changing. Our community is changing. And it's changing because we have this wonderful transportation network that's really improving and opening up Delta to the world. And it'll continue to change as the TFN develops, as we continue to bring in a new bridge potentially into Delta. So we want to be able to analyze those particular pieces. We have to remember that 87% of the Delta Police Department's budget is people. So in other words, if I'm running a restaurant and I know my busy time, because I've analyzed the data, is between 5 and 7 o'clock at night, when do I want to have my chef there? Between 5 and 7. No point having the same amount of staffing at 11 o'clock in the morning, is there? It's about being able to have the right person at the right time, at the right place. So when I talk about being intelligence-led, we need to know when our people need to be there, just like what you saw in the little YouTube video. But at the same time, we have to be evidence-based and we have to be able to respond to that. So we need to know when our police officers, where they should be, and that would be the expectation of the community. Because with 87% of our budget going towards people, we better make sure we're using those people properly. And the expectation as me as chief would be that we'd be using it very efficiently. So that's what the first step will be in our plan, is to make sure we're intelligence-led and that we are evidence-based. Second step, community-based, making sure that we continue with our community-based policing philosophy and no call too small. That's very, very important. We currently enjoy a high level of community confidence because of the level of service and the expectation that our community has, and the partnership that we have with our community. It's very important. Remember I said we'll begin where we end, and that partnership, that's why I'm here today, is be able to strengthen that partnership and ensure we have it going forward. So one of the things when we talk about being community-based is we talk about something that's been very effective for the City of Delta, and we talk about the broken windows theory.
I very much subscribe to the broken windows theory, a theory that was developed by Professors Wilson and Kelling 25 years ago maybe. And the idea of it is you had to pay attention to small things. Otherwise they'd get out of control and they become much worse. And that in fact, you know, in a lot of our approach to crime, quality of life, social programs, we were allowing small things to get worse rather than dealing with them at the earliest possible stage. So that approach had been tried in other cities, but all small cities. and there was a big debate about whether it could work in a city as large as New York. One of the ways that New York used to resist any kind of change was to say, it can't work here, because they wanted to keep the status quo. This is such a desire for people to do that, to keep the status quo. And I thought, well, there's no reason why it can't work in New York City. I mean, we have bigger resources. We may have bigger problems. We have bigger resources. Same theory should work. So we started paying attention to the things that were being ignored. Aggressive panhandling, the squeegee operators that would come up to your car and wash the window of your car whether you wanted it or not. Sometimes, smash people's cars or tires or windows. Or the street-level drug dealing, the prostitution, the graffiti, all these things that were deteriorating the city. So we said, well, we're going to pay attention to that. And it worked. I mean, it worked because we not only got a big reduction in that and an improvement in the quality of life, but massive reductions in homicide. And New York City turned from the crime capital of America to the safest large city in the country for 5-6 years.
However, I can say that the Corporation of Delta has invested well in their police department. That has allowed us to be able to still go to the theft from auto, for us to be able to respond to someone who has their car broken into and be able to talk about what they lost from their car and be able to talk about how we might be able to actually work on catching a bad guy. Really interesting story around the theft from autos that happened in Tawasin. We picked up a thumbprint. A thumbprint was on the rearview mirror. When the person went through the car, they must have adjusted the mirror somehow. We picked up the thumbprint. That's how we found the bad guy. So that's how simple it can be sometimes for us to be able to respond to those calls. The no call too small philosophy, the good investment, the excellent investment the Corporation of Delta has made in the Delta Police Department and in public safety overall allows us to be able to deliver on that particular expectation. Because really, community policing, no call too small, the broken windows theory is the gold standard. And we know it, and we've been very fortunate to be able to provide a gold standard for a significant period of time in Delta, and we'll continue to provide that standard. I want to provide a little bit of an example, because what the no call too small philosophy does for us, it allows us to be able to put a small deposit each and every day into that bank called public confidence and public trust. A small deposit each and every day. So when we have that chance to make that deposit, at one point in time, we may need that bankroll that we have to actually take out. When we have one of those major risks that I spoke about come forward, we will dip into that bank of public trust and public confidence for us to be able to continue to have the satisfaction and take care of the safety needs in a meaningful manner for the residents of Delta. So it's very important to us. Recently, when I was just after being sworn in, there was a letter that went in to the Delta Optimist, a letter to the editor, that said something to the effect of Delta police should spend all their time in the city of Delta and shouldn't spend any time working on any Surrey criminals. We should spend all our time just working on Delta, which, financially kind of makes sense. It's paid for by the taxpayer of Delta. However, we know that border on Scott Road, it doesn't matter to the criminals. They transverse back and forth. So we had that letter there, and I thought, okay, I'm going to give this person a phone call and, just be able to speak to them and be able to have that conversation, or how to be able to, help them understand exactly why we need to work on some people that live in Surrey that may be actually doing crime in Delta. So before I actually was able to get the phone number and phone the person, the next week in the Delta Optimist, there were 3 citizens that wrote in that said, you're crazy. You can't just do that. Criminals don't know the boundaries. They don't. So the huge public support that we have allows us to be able to continue to do the model of policing that we have. So I'm thankful for it. As a matter of fact, I'm very grateful, and I'm here to be able to say thank you for that level of public support and public confidence we have. And that's been built by those tiny individual deposits that we make each and every time we go to the no call too small philosophy, and we provide a level of customer service that they wouldn't receive somewhere else. Very important for us going forward. Community-based, no call too small. Last piece I want to be able to talk about on our plan is road safety. And this was the crash that happened outside the tunnel here approximately, I would say, 18 months ago. Alicia, help me out. Spring, was it? Yes. Horrible tragedy. Horrible tragedy that shut down the 99, right? 99 South for a significant period of time. I'm still challenged here with directions. But that shuts down business as well. The Delta Police Department, it's important that we maintain a level of safety and security on our highways to ensure that we can provide whatever we can, working with our partners, the RCMP, working with CBSA, working with Commercial Truck Inspection Unit, to be able to provide fast-moving transportation that continues to deliver goods all across Canada and certainly to some of the businesses within BC. It's very important that we understand that our job is to keep the roads safe and that we can do it through a number of different ways, working with our partners, whether it be through distracted driving, working with ICBC, whether it be on speed enforcement, whether it be commercial vehicle enforcement, and we know that's only going to be increasing. If Delta Port 2 was to be approved, that would increase significantly the number of trucks on our road. As a result, we better be on top of it and better be well prepared for that. So as we build the plan for the Delta Police Department in the future, road safety is a big piece of what we want to do. I'm the safety of the BC Association Chiefs, I'm the chair of the BC Association Chiefs of Police Traffic Safety Committee. And I can tell you that I don't see another environment within the Lower Mainland that is as important to transportation as Delta. It just simply is that important for us to be able to move goods in and around this particular area and throughout Canada. So that takes us back to the beginning. So that is the plan for public safety in Delta. It's going to be intelligence-led, it's going to be evidence-based, it's going to be community-based, partnerships, problem-solving, working on prevention strategies, continuing with the no call, too small philosophy, continuing with the level of expectation that all our community members have come to expect. And I'm here today to really ask for your help, in the continued partnership that we have with the great business community in this community. Quite frankly, I am so proud to be the chief of the Delta Police Department. It is really the best city in the best province in the best country in the world. And we're very, very fortunate to be here, and I am so fortunate to be here. It is. Distracted driving is everything we do in the cars, whether it be some people read, putting on makeup. Eating. That's right. My mascara. Yes.
And dogs and laps.
Dogs and laps is another one. Anything that would allow us to take our attention off from being on the road.
Exactly. So I was guilty once, but not anymore. So anyway, and the Delta Chamber of Commerce has long enjoyed a close relationship and one that will continue, I'm sure. We work closely with the cops' offices, especially when they have bulletins for businesses, particularly in Annacis and Tilbury. So is that something that you can see continuing and perhaps we can ramp up?
Absolutely. I see the actual partnership with the business community actually being strengthened over the course of time. I think our COPS programs are, it's amazing to think that we have 300 volunteers in the city of Delta, but then I think about the community and it's not that amazing. That's actually quite normal. I think that the volunteerism in this particular community is nothing short of exceptional. However, I know that we want to be able to be more directed in the work that we do out of our COPS office. It used to be that in my old time, I can talk about sort of in 1989 when I opened up the first neighborhood policing office in Edmonton, people would come through the door. But it doesn't happen like that anymore. People aren't coming through the door, so we can be more program-based now in what we do. And that speaks to what you're talking about Annacis and Tilbury and the ability for us to actually be program-based, working with the community as volunteers and as partners.
And in addition to getting the information out, it's taking some of your programs out into the community as well. Like, how many people have heard the term harden your perimeter? Oh, okay, yeah, the good doctor. Absolutely. So anyway, hardening your perimeter is just taking the necessary safety steps to ensure the security of your place of business. And I recall hosting a workshop at one time in Tilbury, and there was an invitation for any new business owner moving in to say, please let us know so we can at least have the squad car come out and take a look around during our patrol, because there's patrols that are happening all times during the day. And the person had missed that little notification by 2 days and had moved in over the weekend, and of course no telephone, no alarm system. So is that something that you would continue to encourage new businesses to come and touch bases with either the office or the COPS office?
Absolutely. The ability for us to be able to connect with a new business shortly upon them moving into the area is critical, not only before they get utilities hooked up, but the ability to be able to tell them what kind of services we might have available to them for them to be able to use. We have people that will come out and do a site assessment as well and provide instructions on exactly what you might need to harden your perimeter or for other necessary public safety needs within your business. Continuity plans, we don't do anything around continuity plans, but it's the ability for us to at least bring it to someone's attention and say, what is your business continuity plan for going forward if there was to be a big flood or something similar?
Tell us what CPTED means.
CPTED, crime prevention through environmental design. So important. So what we can actually do is we know that by designing a public space or a private space, we can actually design in crime prevention, whether you shorten the bushes, whether you have certain lighting, whether you build a fence in a certain area. But there are tips and tricks around crime prevention through environmental design that allow us to actually prevent crime. So very important. Not unlike when I talk about intelligence-led policing, it's something like that, because we know the behaviors of criminals are always the same. And those behaviors we can plan. Just like when you go on Google and go on Amazon, they always recommend what you should be buying based on your previous searching capacity, what you've searched before. And now they'll send you that, for my wife Lorraine, they'll always send her that purse that she looked at and never bought, right? Now you get that chance to buy it. Criminals are the same. They do things in routines, and we have the ability to be able to say, you can design out that routine by designing your premise in such a way.
And if you take that one step further, the statistic that you said about 3 people responsible for those 38 vehicle break-ins in Tawasin, there's 38 opportunities to touch base with those responsible parties as well. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely. Now I'm going to get the name wrong, so excuse me, so someone can help me. Pete McMartin?
Yes.
Is that the Vancouver Sun?
Yes.
Yes, the Vancouver Sun. So there's an article written in today's paper, and that's a Delta Police article. So he talks about having a break-in. He lives in the Beach Grove area in Tawasin, and he talks about having a break-in and how surprised he was to have victim services call the day after he had the break-in. And it was the ability for us to be able to check in and say, would you like someone to be able to come and talk to you about that particular break-in? Is there anything that we can assist you with? Not only emotionally, but they also provide some tips and tricks around how to make your premise safer and how to avoid it sometime in the future. So every one of those chances is an opportunity for us to prevent crime in the future.
Absolutely. And again, I'll say from the Delta Chamber's perspective, if there's tips and tricks that you want to send out to the business community and encourage that interaction, and business communities are responsible for an awful lot of residents, both here in Delta and elsewhere, we're happy to work with you on that as well. I've got a question here and another one coming. Thank you. No call too small is great, but what about no call at all? And that specter, let's say. How do you fund proactive preventative strategies in a tightening resource climate? You said 83% of your budget is in people,
Yes.
and how are you able to balance that? And that's probably another thing, number 11, that keeps you up at night.
Absolutely. So we refer to this in policing as the economics of policing. We know that all municipalities, we have to be more and more efficient with our resources to ensure that we are delivering the best possible service at the most reasonable cost, not unlike any business model that you would have running your own businesses. So it's very important for us to always be looking for efficiencies in how we do things to make sure that we can deliver at the level of expectation. And we prioritize. Quite frankly, there are some things we can't do because we want to deliver on the no call too small philosophy. And there's also some ways we can be able to assist in being able to use our large volunteer pool to be able to make sure that, although it may not be a police officer in the first instance, at least we have some connection that can provide some advice, and then we can begin that conversation that has to happen. That's that conversation I spoke about with the community and the police.
I've worked with Helmuth and a couple of people in your statistical department, let's say, the intelligence department, looking at where it's happening and looking for patterns and trends, especially theft from auto, theft of gas, as it happens in industrial areas. Is that something, other than the monthly statistics after things have occurred, is there a way to proactively let people know, we're in the red zone, but business warning, 7200 Block River Road, such and such happened, or are we dealing with privacy issues?
You know what, the privacy issues sometimes become a barrier just when we're talking about personal information. There's no privacy issues when we're talking about basic locations, times of days, and days of week. So there is information that we can provide very easily to be able to alert community members around what's happening around them. So I don't think we do a tremendous job at this point in time in sharing that information. Some organizations have crime maps right on the website, and they share it, so you have the ability to be able to go and see your house and see what's happening in and around your house. At this point in time, we're not doing that, but certainly into the future, it might be an option.
Right. And of course, you've got that, actually, if I'm not mistaken, don't they exist already, the maps? The maps already online? Month after
They're static maps, I think.
They're static maps. Oh, right, yeah, absolutely, yes. So after the events occurred, as opposed to within 24 hours of it happening.
Right.
Which would be, I'm sorry, like a gold standard, or maybe, yeah, exactly. Because somebody said here in Richmond, we are notified if there's been a break-in or attempted break-in. I don't know whether that's residential, commercial. Is it available in Delta, or is this sort of another part of the change process that you're looking at?
It's available in Delta currently, but it has to be part of the Neighborhood Watch program. So unless it's part of the Neighborhood Watch program, it wouldn't be you wouldn't be notified in your community.
Right.
So if you're part of that, typically that information will go to whoever the Neighborhood Watch leader is, and then they would notify the necessary community members who are part of the Neighborhood Watch.
Super.
But there's opportunity to be able to expand as well.
Excellent. So another way of getting the information out through Neighborhood Watch, and sort of not putting a little more emphasis on there, that again, the Chamber can hopefully help with. How many people are members of their Neighborhood Watch? Doctor? Yeah. Who's that back? Bernie? Bernie, do you live in Delta?
Yeah.
Whereabouts?
Awesome.
And how long has the Neighborhood Watch been active in your area?
I don't know, we moved there about 5 years ago and it's active already, so I'm not really sure. And our old block, we instituted it ourselves about 8 or 9 years ago, I guess.
Great program. They even have some electronic now. They call it Net Watch, I think is what they call it. And it's a group of neighbors that connect, whether it be on Facebook or something else. But they share information, almost real time with each other through some sort of social media forum.
Just checking our time. If anybody else has any questions, or I can pull some more off the top of my head. Oh, we got lots of time. I love your questions. If you could please write them down and hand them to staff, that'd be great. So we talked about SEPTED, we talked about Neighborhood Watch. What if we all go on holidays at the same time? Is there anything that COPS offices do about that?
Absolutely. So our COPS offices provide a service that they'll go by and check your house for you. So, as far as I know of, there's nothing else available like this in the Lower Mainland, but they will go by your house and actually, turn your mailbox, make sure it's not filled with papers and newsprint that shows signs of you not being home. So there is that option for you to be able to go into your COPS office if you're going away, and then be able to have someone check on your house.
So we're talking about tools for not only business owners but for residents as well. How many people knew about that service here? How many people have taken advantage of it? And how many people haven't? How many people are going to after having heard about it? So, don't be shy. That's what they're here for, right?
Absolutely.
So it's your Delta Police Department. How many members?
So we currently have 177 members.
And admin staff supporting that?
Somewhere in the area of 50 or so, 50 to 60.
Great stuff. And we don't have a jail here anymore.
No jail.
And where do we take them for Her Majesty's
Yes, we take them to
guest?
Surrey.
Surrey.
Yes. That's a good place, right? So yes.
Now.
It's called the Catch and Release Program.
Yeah, I thought that was just on the river. Thanks, Louise. Here's another, what role do you see social media playing in crime prevention or law enforcement? And I don't know if you saw the Chamber's latest tweet this morning.
I didn't see it this morning.
Oh, you didn't? Oh, well, it said, we're so excited and we just can't hide it. Delta's top cough, it will talk, and we think we like it, ooh-wee. So anyway, there was a couple of people who registered after that one. So socially, we're all connected. If we're not, our kids are, and insanity's hereditary. You get it from your children, along with the greatest little bits of information. So what role do you see social media playing in crime prevention, even as it relates to some of these notifications about break-ins, or critical incidents, or traffic accidents, that type of thing?
We live in this connected world now that's just so amazing. I mean, I thought Twitter was a bird and the cloud was something in the sky. And I mean, it just goes on and on and on about all these new things that have sort of come in the last decade or so. And it continues to evolve our businesses in policing, both investigatively, it's a great tool for investigations, but also on the other side with regards to prevention, because it's next to real-time information. So valuable. I think that we're on the very precipice of beginning to understand what it can do for policing. It's so much work. I wish I didn't have to do social media, but there's just no better way to be able to connect instantaneously with a whole group of people. And I know once I came to Delta, I just do Twitter. I'm not a Facebook guy, but Twitter, and it grew exponentially. But it was great. It was great to see community people actually connecting in a way that I would never have had the opportunity to connect with them otherwise.
Great. And of course, thank you. And we've been promoting the fact that the Delta Police Pipe Band is over at National Tiptoe, which is the national tattoo in Holland, and we'll be there for the 70th anniversary for the liberation of Rotterdam. And you're going to be flying on a jet plane awfully soon, aren't you?
I am, so I'll be joining Her Worship over in Rotterdam and then the Police Pipe Band to do a big tattoo and a parade tomorrow, as a matter of fact. Pretty amazing. As far as community ambassadors, the Delta Police Pipe Band are just amazing. And these aren't Delta police officers. These are officers or volunteers from the community all over, whether they live in Delta or not. But at every major event, they're out there, and they do such an amazing job to be able to represent Delta and really what we stand for, which is that level of community participation.
And speaking of community participation, somebody asks, what is the root cause of crime in Delta, if you can put your finger on it? And if it's drugs, what's the best way to solve the problem in the long term?
You know what, certainly drugs, and I'm going to say two things. Mental illness and drugs certainly drive a lot of our business, the two of those, and I think they're two areas that we spend a tremendous amount of time responding as the crisis responders. We're the agency of last resort often, and as being the agency of last resort, the only ones up at 3 o'clock in the morning, it ends up being your police department, not your social workers, that end up responding to this. So we really do have to start to unpack that box and understand what drives a lot of that. I've recently, most of you have attended sort of a Rotary presentation. I've been on the speaking tour, and I talk about this case of mental health around a 12-year-old child who's identified very early in our schools by a school liaison officer, and then by the time he's 20, he's in jail for homicide. So we see the path coming, but we have just no ways to be able to provide the services necessary to stop it. It's like a snowball coming down the hill, and it's too late by the time that child gets to be 13 or 14 years old. So we need to be more involved with our community partners. We need to be more involved with mental health and provincial government, and we need to be able to be strong advocates for people within our community who are suffering from mental illness.
So to take an example from the healthcare system, you're talking about a care plan for an individual, making sure that the right people are around the table in order to affect the best possible outcome.
Ian, what typically happens is the barriers immediately come up around sharing information. That's always where the initial barriers come up. Some people refer to it as a wraparound service. Some people refer to it as a hub model. There's been something highly publicized in Prince Albert that was hugely successful in Saskatchewan around being a hub model. I think Surrey is trying to go that way, about a number of different partners at the table being able to share information around people that typically we haven't been able to share in the past. So breaking down those information barriers and then beginning to talk about people and their wellness plans, not just about how we're going to stop them from their next activity, but how we actually reintegrate them back into meaningful work in their society.
And I suppose it's care or the right combination of resources that are focused on the individual, as opposed to people saying, well, it's my turf, right? You have it to break down that institutional process too, don't you?
You do, and everyone thinks that their information is the best information, and it's the ability to actually put it all on the table. I often say it's like a puzzle, and when we see tragedy happen sometimes, it's around, we all had a piece of the puzzle, but when you put it all together, it puts a beautiful picture together that we could have done something, but everyone held a piece to that puzzle, and until we all came together and actually built it together, we wouldn't have been able to see the overall picture. So somehow we need to build that with all our community partners.
And that goes for a micro level and a macro level, community-wide as well.
Absolutely, both right at the neighborhood level and then spinning right out to really, I'm going to talk about a policing level across all the Lower Mainland.
Speaking of integration, canines are shared, aren't they?
They are. So we have, you're the
I'm just testing your ability to,
Absolutely.
anyways.
Great question, absolutely great question though. In relation to the Delta Police Department, we have really three large pieces of integration that are happening. We have our cells, which is now in Surrey, so it really isn't the catch and release program, we bring in the Surrey cells. And they look after it, and that's a contract service for us. The Delta Police Department needed significant upgrades to meet a provincial standard in our cells. And it just wasn't worth it in the existing building we have to put in the $1 million of renovations that we needed, and we were able to contract this out to Surrey, and it works well for us currently. And Surrey is well prepared for lots of prisoners. They bring lots of people through there. Take that however you want it to read.
They were looking at statistics, it's 10,000 people a month, so they say, hey, make the cells bigger, right? Or make more of them.
And they've got some resources to help them on that. The second piece was we had our integrated emergency response team. So we're with the RCMP emergency response team and ourselves, New West Police Department. I'm trying to think of all, Port Moody is there as well. There's a large number of small municipalities who can't afford to have a full-time emergency response team of 12 people working just solely on critical incidents, the response to critical incidents, when you only have maybe a half a dozen a year. So we work, and we currently have some Delta police members integrated to the emergency response team with the RCMP, part of a large team that's about 90 people. The third piece we have is an integrated canine team. So we used to be in a partnership with Port Moody and New West Police Department around a canine section. We had a number of different dogs that were available 24/7 through an integration of around the three municipalities. Both Port Moody and New West decided to go to the RCMP integrated canine unit, and that left us sort of with only 4 dogs, not the ability to cover 24/7. So since that time, we've also integrated with the RCMP around our canine unit, but I can certainly tell you that currently that is under review, and we want to take a better look at that and see if that's the right solution for Delta. I'm not absolutely convinced, and I think right now we are doing something evidence-based to be able to look at that and see whether or not that is the right solution, both financially and for this community, because we do have those high expectations. We want to make sure we meet them with our canine unit.
Super. And it just makes sense with sharing of finite resources, and because there's a quid pro quo, it's always going to come back, be it the ERT or whomever else. I mean, they're on call for us as well.
Absolutely. They do a great job when we call.
Super. It's going to matters maritime. Let's do that, since we're all surrounded by water, be it salt or fresh. There's so many factors around the water's edge, the port, mariners, a fishing fleet, airport, etc. What's your approach to policing on the water, and how do you patrol the river, or prevent water theft? Theft. Sorry, you know what I mean. Water-based theft. Water-based theft. Yeah, but that just dilutes, right? So anyway, yeah, you know what I mean. Yeah. So I'll give you an example.
Yes.
There was a business in Annacis that had hardened its perimeter, unbelievably so, and of course had all the cameras facing the road as opposed to facing the river. And some guy came up and cut a big hole in the chain link fence at the back where there were no cameras, there were no lights, had to go in and around barges and log booms, and they didn't find it for I don't know how long, and then all of a sudden, what's the hole in the fence? So anyway, so it happens.
Absolutely it does. We have 3 partnerships that we depend on for any kind of water response that we do. We have a partnership with the Richmond RCMP, who have a boat, and we go on summer patrols with the Richmond RCMP to look for people that are drinking on the river and people that are using the water for some sort of activity that is less than lawful. The second partnership we have is with New West Police Department, and the ability for us to be able to get underneath maybe the Alex Fraser Bridge for someone who is thinking of jumping off the bridge or something similar. So we have a partnership to be able to jump into their boat and get out to the Alex Fraser fairly quickly. And the last partnership we have is with the ports. And the ports have some ability to be able to get on the water, and we do have a partnership with the ports to be able to manage that piece. We do not have our own response for the water. It's always in partnership. And it's funny, you've got to specialize. It's a very special skill to be able to have a water response, and it demands a lot of resources, a lot of time and money. And we think our partnerships is the best way to approach that.
Right, so it's being fiscally prudent in the face of where do I allocate the resources. It's looking at your evidence-based occurrences and saying, is it the best possible expenditure? Is it the best possible allocation of resources and making the best possible decision?
And really, let's bring it right down to a rock-solid example, is the fact that if we only respond to, I'm making this number up, I have no idea what it would be, but a half a dozen calls on the water, is it worthwhile having a large unit that's well-trained and well-prepared with heavy equipment and assets when we can't respond to a theft from auto and have to take your call over the phone? So it's around priority setting, around the model of policing that we choose in Delta that really is supported heavily and really guided for us by the community.
And you're probably looking at a $350,000 capital investment and then ongoing operating costs, and where does that come from?
Absolutely, and a police officer, to get one police officer 24/7, you need 5. So in order for you to have one cop more on the street 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, you gotta hire 5. So it's a significant investment. So every officer you put on the street for 24/7 coverage, if you hire 5, that's a $500,000 investment. So it begins to add up fairly quickly.
Exactly. You had talked about the fact that we're in a red zone and looking at regional disaster scenarios. Where does DPD fit either in the process or chain of command, or what the entities that it's cooperating with? And I'm sure we have a seat at the table, but maybe you could elaborate more with that.
Sure. The emergency response for Delta is held through the corporation. They have a well-exercised and a good plan for overall emergency response through the Corporation of Delta. The police department are a piece of that plan, and we have a large piece. In addition, we have partnerships with Emergency Management BC and being able to ensure that we are in line with what the provincial resources are around any kind of disaster as well.
If crime in Delta is partly related to mental illness, what percentage of your officers have specific training in this area? Or is that something that everybody receives on an annual or ongoing development process?
The answer is probably not enough to begin with. However, we do have all our officers trained in basic crisis intervention, is what we call it. The JIBC actually does a wonderful course for us to be able to prepare our officers on how to de-escalate a situation rather than being able to, if someone's suffering from a mental illness or an episode of some sort, we want to avoid going into an area and actually, yelling directions and being very direct. It's around being soft and understanding and being able to de-escalate. So all our officers are trained in de-escalation, but some of our officers, a very small number, there would probably be a half a dozen, maybe 5 or 6 overall, that have some very special skills, and they work in our areas that we call a vulnerable person section, and it's the ability to deal with mental illness on a much more frequent basis. So we will identify people in the community that have an ongoing issue and that are frequent flyers of the police, and then we'll find ways to be able to problem solve with our partners to eliminate those issues from coming to the police's attention and helping the people, whether it be taking medication or getting the proper treatment they need.
With all the development that's taking place on Tsawwassen First Nations treaty settlement lands, you've now got Aquilini in there building housing. You've got Ivanhoe Cambridge with its Tsawwassen Mills project, and you've got Property Development Group with its Tsawwassen Commons. And certainly between road expansion and everything else, it's going to be quite the concentration of humanity, be it residents or workers or otherwise. Tell us what your thoughts are on or how you're working with Tsawwassen First Nation to look at policing requirements, short, medium, and long term.
Tsawwassen First Nations, first of all, has been great to deal with. They certainly are very alive to the possibilities that they want to be strong partners with the Delta Police Department in order to be able to prevent things that are coming forward. And we really have a chance to get in front of things that may happen. They suggest that they may be as many as 7,000 to 9,000 cars per day, when that mall is fully operational, which is a heck of a bunch. And as a result, when I talked about traffic safety, it all becomes around traffic. Over the course of my career, coming on 29 years in policing, I've probably done, maybe 100 town hall or 75 town hall meetings. What would you think the first issue always comes out in any town hall meeting? Any ideas? Traffic is always the first issue, always. Every once in a while you'll get a neighborhood that's experiencing, some shootings, and if there's a gang problem or a drug problem, that will come forward. But at all these town hall meetings, it's always traffic. And I'll turn to Peter German. How many times have you heard that at a town hall meeting, that it's traffic? It just always is the case. So for us, as we begin to look at what we're going to do for Tsawwassen First Nation, it begins with a strong traffic plan, it begins with a strong crime prevention through environmental design plan, and it begins around preparing and working closely with Tsawwassen First Nations, ensuring that they're well invested in their public safety program as well.
Super. One last question, and it has to deal with
This is an inquisition.
Nobody
Yeah.
expects the Inquisition. Amongst our chief elements are fear, surprise, abusive efficiency, and almost fanatical devotion to the Pope. Anyway, that was Monty Python. I don't know why I remember those things. But anyway, substance abuse. There was a recent Tsawwassen House drug bust where there was a drug called Shatter being produced. How will Delta Police Department continue to address and engage the community in things like that, beyond the crime reporting and warnings, let's say?
You know, what's interesting, I don't think I've said this at any public forum before, but what's interesting about that particular house is it was a legalized marijuana grow, so it by Health Canada. So what we often see through the legalized operation of marijuana grows is we see a side spin-off business of, and unfortunately, some of the unhealthy things we see. So for anyone that doesn't know what shatter is a derivative of marijuana where they actually run butane through the marijuana, and the butane molecule connects with the THC molecule. So it ends up being a very, very, and then what they do is they burn away the butane and you're left with just with straight THC, about 87%. So it's a very, compared to the mum and pop grass you would smoke in the 60s, you know, where it was 3 to 5% THC, you will see shatter be at 87%. And then they smoke it in vaporizers. So we always see those people walking down the street with those vapor cigarettes and think that, oh, you know, they're trying to quit smoking, aren't they nice people? You know, but often they'll have some derivative of some sort of illegal drug within the vaporizer as well. So it's just not tobacco of some sort. Our drug section, you know, we're very fortunate. I mentioned this several times, and it's probably worth mentioning one more time. The investment that the corporation puts into the Delta Police Department is significant in public safety, and certainly the Delta Police Department. And we're fortunate to be able to have a small drug section, which provides us an opportunity to be able to really focus in on problems that we have. And I think that's part of the reason why these drug houses don't survive very long within this community, is that we're able to put some very specific resources onto the problem and eliminate it. And we say that sometimes we just move the problem to somewhere else, and that's true. But at the same time, every time you move it, you weaken the problem and you can attack it with different tools. So that's what we hope to be able to do.
Super. Neil, thank you very, very much for your remarks.